Yeah. Feel free to move closer.
Oh, okay.
Get cozy. Come on in if you were in the other room. Come join us. It has been a wonderful inaugural Wellness Fest. And this is the last program of the day. And for this one, we're going to have what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. But first, I want to introduce myself and these two wonderful people. I am Arielle Silver. I'm the program manager at the SONA Foundation. Songwriters of North America, SONA, is a advocacy organization that is working toward and constantly working toward better pay, better work settings for songwriters, working for the industry of songwriters as a whole. And they go down to Congress and are lobbying for fair pay for songwriters. And that's what Songwriters of North America is. And then we have a sister organization that I am the program manager for called the SONA Foundation. And over here at the foundation, we create resources and programs for the individual songwriter in mental health, career development, and financial wellness. And today has been a wellness fest. All kinds of things started off with heated indoor cycling, and then vinyasa flow yoga, R&B yoga, sound bath, guided meditation and breath work. And here we're going to have a conversation about music makers and mental health. So I want to introduce you to, let's start with Tracy. Tracy Dickerson is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a master's degree in clinical psychology from Antioch University and has a private practice in Los Angeles. She is also a singer-songwriter under the name Tracy Spulver and writes deceptively simple indie pop songs that have been in KCRW's Top 50, CMJ's Top 200, and nominated for LA Weekly's Best Singer-Songwriter Award. Her songs have been heard in shows such as The Office, Switched at Birth, Weeds, and Royal Pains, among others. Tracy's background as a musician and songwriter informs her work with creative expression, and her longtime meditation practice has informed the mindfulness techniques that she brings to her clients to support the well-being of individuals and couples. She is currently writing songs about well-being. Kay Hanley is a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning songwriter. As a singer and songwriter, Kay is known for her work with her band Letters to Cleo, as the singing voice for Rachel Lee Cook's character Josie in the movie Josie and the Pussycats, and as co-composer with longtime songwriting partner Michelle Lewis for the hit Disney series Doc McStuffins, Cartoon Network's and WB's DC Superhero Girls, Harvey Girls Forever, and Netflix Ada Twist Scientist. More recently, she has been an executive producer and music composer for Disney Junior's new series, Kindergarten, the musical, just out.
Watch it,
Awesome.
stream it.
Totally. Kay is a co-founder of Songwriters of North America, SONA, and is also a co-founder of the SONA Foundation. And I am really happy, I think we are all really happy to be right here having a conversation with the two of you about music creators, therapy, and all of that stuff. So, hi, how are you two?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Tracy and I just
Hi,
met on Zoom, so we're meeting for the first time in person today to talk about songwriters and therapy, mainly, and mental health writ large.
And we were thinking that even though we all just enjoyed Sarah's meditation, which was so incredible and very grounding and opening, as you said, Kay, we thought it might be helpful in this new space and kind of in transition to this piece to all together take a few deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And when you breathe in, try to get that breath deep into the lower belly. Maybe for the last one, give a nice sigh out the mouth. To arrive here together.
And now we are all here.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that. Wow, I'm like out of my body right now. I'm coming back into my body though. Thank you to my wonderful husband Clay for the space, and Noah, wherever you are. Hey Noah. Noah is the sort of studio assistant manager here, and he is the son of Jack Hugel, who is a co-founder of SONA. So just kind of a couple of degrees of separation. So when we were sort of, one of the things that is so appealing about the SONA Foundation for me, and the reason that I joined the board of the SONA Foundation is songwriters and mental health. Well, I think mental health and getting services for mental health is really kind of a mystery to everyone until you do it. And I think for songwriters it's especially challenging for many reasons. You know, a lot of us are kind of like attached to our suffering because it helps us write better, and attached to our trauma because it's, where else are we going to get our songs from? You know? And also, you know, we're the lack of standardized health care across our industry. You know, there's just lots of barriers to entry. So I was, the last time I was in therapy. Oh, and by the way, I'm speaking from experience. Like, I don't know how to, I want to go into therapy. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to find a therapist. I don't know what kind I want. I don't know what I want to accomplish, really. The last time I was in therapy, I was in treatment for addiction, and was in a very, very bad place in my life. And when I got out of rehab, I was in therapy for about 2 years, but shit was just so heavy then. Like, it was so intense and frightening, like the stuff that I was dealing with at that time, that once I was kind of, you know, once things started like coming together a little bit, and I'm feeling kind of done with therapy, I was like, I'm just gonna not dig for a couple of years. And so that was 11 years ago, and now I would love to revisit therapy in my current headspace, which is just normal fuckery in my right.
Run-of-the-mill fuckery is what
Yeah.
we technically call
Yes,
it.
that's what you have your degree in, right?
Yes.
That's one of your, it's a class you teach, general fuckery. And so when I was talking to Tracy and Arielle about doing this panel, I thought that like it would be helpful for me to explain my situation and what I'm looking to do, and hopefully through that and talking to Tracy and with the help of Arielle, who's got the notes from our conversation, we can sort of like demystify the process. So what am I doing, Tracy?
Wow. Okay. So, you know, we also, when we were talking, we were kind of like, is this like a mini therapy session? Is it a kind of explanation of like the different types of therapy, or just kind of like also hearing from you at some point, like if you have questions or your own barriers potentially for finding a therapist. And yeah, I mean,
What kind of therapy what kind of therapy do you practice?
so let's see. So my brief journey to become a therapist was I was doing songs for commercials and TV, custom music, and I was doing a lot of kind of like in the sync world with my solo album and music production albums and stuff like that. And then when I was 40, I read a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom, and it was about a woman's, the author is Rachel Naomi Remen, and it was these bite-sized chapters of her telling her story, her own challenges with wellness, like, and physical issues. And then she was working with cancer patients. And so so each one of those chapters was just packed a punch and just felt really meaningful. And my mom died of cancer, and I have lots of cancer in my family, and so that just kind of sparked. I had thought about being a therapist in my 20s, but then ended up on the music journey, so it just kind of came back around, and I decided to go for it. So so one of my specializations is working with people impacted by cancer, but then also in the journey, I really started recognizing first of all, how creative the role as a therapist felt, and it felt very similar to writing a song, being in collaboration, and then also just that space, and I'm sure many of you can relate, but writing a song, you're just kind of open to that ether. And
it's also so
being
vulnerable.
present, so vulnerable
with a stranger.
Yeah.
Just like doing that trust fall.
Yes.
Of like, I don't know you, and I'm about to just tell you, just barf my life all over, just
Yeah.
tell you everything.
Yes.
And that is like writing a song when you meet your collaborators for the first time and doing. Michelle Lewis, my writing partner, who's running around somewhere
Here?
being crazy. No, planning for she was
Oh,
here.
that was Michelle. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then they're doing the Warrior Awards tomorrow. So I'm just showing up. I just have to put on my hair extensions and a dress, and I'll be. And that's all I have to do.
Fabulous.
But like she calls it when you collaborate with someone for the first time, it's the trust song, where like you'll. Like when you go into, it's like a dance, and then even if the other person's idea is like you never go for it, you just kind of go with it just to like see, because you want to set aside all your preconceived notions and just like see where it goes, see what happens, and like try not to interject.
Yeah, totally.
And so that seems like what you do every day.
Yeah.
Again. In your new career.
Yes, 100%. And being just super present and open. So that's, for me, kind of like having the practices that I continue to figure out, but through like meditation and all these different kinds of practices that help me stay grounded and centered, so that when I'm working with somebody, and there's also that like co-regulation that happens between.
What's co-regulation?
So co-regulation, thank you, Kay. I was saying to them, I try to not use a lot of jargon, but it just comes out.
What the fuck is that? Tell us.
So one of the things that we just experienced with Sarah in the other room was regulating our nervous system. So that is the kind of part of our body that experiences fight, flight, and freeze. That if we feel threatened, and it could be a real threat or completely perceived threat, our bodies go into one of those or all of those, and then that kind of shuts off the part of our brain that can be reasonable and rational. And so being able to regulate your nervous system is a way to, when you find yourself maybe confronted with anxiety, or just as an example, that's a dysregulation of your nervous system. And so it's kind of like finding ways back to that centeredness and groundedness.
So it's not co-regulation is
and,
not
and co-regulation happens.
Between me and you.
It does happen.
It's co-regulation within your head and your mind and your body. And
so it happens internally. It happens between people. Like if you even think of a baby, the baby you're helping the baby regulate with your nervous system. But that happens as adults. It happens between everybody that you meet and see and spend time with. So that also happens in the therapy space, that there's that kind of co-regulation. So for me as a therapist, it's important to have my own practices to stay grounded, because someone I'm working with may not be feeling regulated. So that is a helpful piece.
Do you ever feel dysregulated after a therapy session? Like if someone's energy is so, basically I really want to just get the gossip.
Yeah,
about
the hot goss.
No, but like, I mean,
Well, the other day.
is it possible to get dysregulated from other people? Like, can other people's
It is.
energy just like
Yeah.
completely
Kind of disrupt
the
my
frequency?
regulation? Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's just also like humanness, you know. And for me, if I do feel if I'm feeling it in the session, excuse me, I will feel my feet on the ground, and I'll be doing things like, you know, I don't know, you all can do this with me if you want, because this is a really good one. So one is just feet on the ground, kind of what you were talking about, Sarah, the feeling the contact point. So just where you're placing your attention and just really rooting down. And then another thing that's helpful or can be helpful is if you put your fingers, your thumb and your index finger together. And you can do this with your eyes open or closed. Sometimes it helps just to like get a sense of it with your eyes closed, but then once you practice, you can do it anywhere, like standing in line at the grocery store. But really focusing your attention on feeling the grooves of your fingertips, just kind of slightly rubbing your fingers together. And if your mind starts wandering, just gently bringing your attention back to the sensation of your fingertips. So that's just one little
And does that
Yeah,
just bring you
tool.
back into your body?
So it brings me back into the body and helps me kind of get back to being present and feeling more centered.
I've heard that anxiety is depression is thinking about the past and anxiety is thinking about the future. And if you're present, then
There's neither
then you're
that
not
or
looking
that.
back or
Yeah.
forward. You're like right here.
Yeah.
And that's like, so getting back into your body and being really present, like where is my butt right now, where are my feet, that's
Just
really
really-
very practical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something you can do when you're talking to someone. I'm doing it right now. I'm feeling.
Arielle, have we?
So, I did want to say something actually, just about like one of the first things I would do if this were our first session.
Oh, right. So this is about me, right? Okay.
is I would talk about confidentiality, which is so a huge part for me of therapy, just as the kind of foundation, is to create a safe space, and one where the person I'm working with feels like I'm not making any judgments about them. I am with them and collaborating with them. I'm not leaving them by themselves. I'm not by myself. We're working together and exploring, and I'm bringing curiosity, so kind of like questions and openness. And so confidentiality is a big piece of that. I mean, it's something I'm ethically bound to as a therapist, but it's something I feel is important because, you know, that will help someone feel safe, that I'm not going to be, you know, shit talking them
come
after
on
the
panel
session.
and like
Yeah, that
being
K.
goaded into telling secrets by me.
So this is obviously not confidential, K.
Right.
And so I just wanted to, if this were an actual session, we would not have an audience.
Right.
And so I just want to say that as, something that goes along with therapy in
I
general.
mean, this isn't a normal therapy session for you.
It's a little different.
Because I only ever want to do therapy like this.
But I also want to say that because I know you're very open from what I, have gathered in our brief time of chatting together. And I just, because this is maybe being, I don't know if it's videotaped, to just be mindful that whatever, you want to just be mindful of what you're sharing. And same with myself, I'm happy to be transparent about my life and the shit I've experienced too, so anyway, just with that in mind.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I think that is important because, not everybody is an open book, so you'll be careful. And I feel like there was something that I wanted to, but I feel like
To talk
I need,
Well, I feel like
I need a prompt from you.
Yeah, we had talked about how you had done therapy in the past, and then you took this time off, and you wanted to come back to it. But there were questions that you had that were both pragmatic and logistical, like how do I find a therapist and all of that stuff. But there was also like what even happens in the first meeting aside from the confidentiality piece. What can one expect, or what can Kay expect when she first meets with you or another therapist? What is that first session before, when you're talking about the co-regulation and all of that stuff? You're meeting a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you start that relationship building? How do you start that collaboration, that feeling of safety, so much so that it allows, because I guess the goal is to have a safe space so that the client feels safe to enter, quote unquote dangerous territory.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily monsters, but just going deeper than they might in like a daily life with their, the people that they're interacting with, in that way.
Yeah.
So what happens in that first session?
Well, I also just want to mention, this is just a therapy thing, that with confidentiality, there are exceptions that I explain in the beginning, which is if there's any threat of harm to yourself or to somebody else, or a vulnerable population like suspected child abuse or dependent adult abuse. So those are the exceptions to confidentiality.
You're a mandated reporter.
Mm-hmm.
Who else is a mandated reporter? Like nurses, doctors,
Teachers.
therapists,
Mm-hmm.
right? Teachers.
Yeah. So that's a little tricky, but for the most part,
That's not going to come up
that's
between
no,
me
that
and
I'm not expecting that.
I'm not going to hurt any. I mean, not immediately.
No.
So one of the
imminent
things, and I
danger.
think that
So,
bouncing off what you were saying,
Yeah.
when we were talking, I'm not sure which one of you said, like, what is the goal of therapy for
you.
For me.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't have a goal. I just want to, by the way, in case I didn't mention it, I'm 13 years sober, so that all did work out. So I'm not, definitely not in that space anymore. Like things, that all worked out, and I take care of my recovery daily to make sure that I maintain it. It's very important to me. But in this but all of those things that, sort of that I wanted to like numb or push down, like they don't just go away. Like the stuff that we learned, these coping mechanisms they stay with us. So like a lot of these things, like even though I don't drink or use drugs to treat that anymore, I do other stuff those causes and conditions are still very much a part of me. And so as I am going into the next sort of this third act of my life in my 50s, I kind of want to explore a little bit what makes me tick. And I don't have a goal per se, but I just want to improve.
Yeah. And so if I were going back to what you were saying, if we were in our first session, I would say, okay, that's totally fine. You don't need to have a goal. You don't need to have to know what it is that you want to accomplish in therapy. This is, again, back to the collaboration. This is something that we will explore and continue to explore together. I may ask you, what would be your hope coming out of today's session? Like, to kind of, and not even, and obviously you don't need to know that either, but that's something I often, especially with couples, will kind of check in with each of them for their hopes. One-on-one, it's a little bit more, it's not as necessary for me
Right.
to kind of,
Is it not as, does it need to be a little bit more controlled on your part? Like you have to do a lot more moderating when you're
with couples.
Yeah.
And just that they each have their own thing that they're kind of wanting, that
Right.
are usually different from each other. Sometimes they find out it's similar, and
But
that's a whole other
that's
thing.
kind of like where that you will lead them there, and not necessarily, you won't direct them there, but lead them with your curiosity and
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And I always think that is the mark of a really good therapist, or not that I've seen a ton of therapists, but just in general, someone who asks great questions and like listens for the follow-up question, and kind of just is just sort of like a tour guide through your psyche, helps you, sort of like gives you that map.
Yeah.
It's like
And
ways
that's
for your
something,
brain.
and that's like when you, like, that's really great information for you to know that for yourself and feel that when you are maybe having a consultation with, I recommend people talking with a few therapists because the fit is so important in terms of what the vibe that you get, because the relationship that you ultimately have is a huge.
You can
interview
therapists.
therapists.
Do you have to pay for
So
that?
no,
What?
like most therapists will offer like a 15 or 20-minute free consultation.
That's amazing. I did not know that.
There you go.
Write that down.
So that's one thing, one less barrier.
Okay.
But when you specifically are talking with people, that's something you can kind of tune into.
Mm-hmm.
Like what type of questions are they asking me? How am I feeling in terms of what they're asking? Does it feel like I'm, kind of leaning in and getting engaged, or am I like,
Right.
And
how do you feel about like boy, girl? They're like.
I think it's totally, again, I would maybe throw in, maybe two females, one male for your, for your referral list. Yeah.
Oh, I'm loving this. Okay, how do people find you? Like, how do people get your
Find
phone
my
number?
way.
Yeah.
Find their way to me. It is most often through other therapists. So also, there's a place called Cancer Support Community. That's an amazing resource, free support groups and mind-body workshops for people who are impacted by cancer, both with a diagnosis and caregivers. So they, at that center, and also some doctors will refer to me. But a lot comes from other therapists, and the same, let's say you're looking for a therapist, and it depends. If there's somebody where I feel like I need to hold a firmer boundary, then I don't share so much. But most of the time, I would say I share things that I feel are helpful to the process, let's say. So it's more if it's something that I feel like will connect us in a way. If it's something that's, I don't know, like, because I do have different practices that I'll bring in, like, oh, you know, morning pages, if it feels like that would be helpful for somebody, that I'll talk about my morning pages practice and offer that, and I can describe from my own personal experience, like, what it brings me, and that they might have a different experience, but that, you know, here's some reasons why it could be helpful, you know.
But you're not going to tell them what you wrote about in your morning page.
I am not gonna, no, I don't think anyone wants to hear that. I don't even want to go back and read it, but yes.
Like the line.
But that's the line, and I'll say, you know, I'll talk about, like, some people know I'm a songwriter, singer-songwriter. Other people don't. So it really depends for me how kind of transparent I am. But generally, I bring myself into the room, whether or not I'm sharing the details. I'm bringing kind of my authentic self, if that makes sense.
Other questions?
You're all very
Any
well
more?
adjusted.
Kay, do you have more questions for Tracy?
I don't. What is the average, like, in Los Angeles? What is this sort of, or what? Not the average. What's the range of cost? I'm assuming for a therapist.
Yeah. So I would say anywhere from for licensed therapists, I would say it's generally these days around $250 to $300. There are associates who are getting their license, who are being supervised by licensed therapists, and the reason why I feel like associates are charging a lot more than I used to charge when I was coming up in this business. But again, they also might be a lot more able to slide their fee. They don't have as much experience necessarily, but oftentimes they have a lot of life experience that they're bringing in, and they're being supervised by licensed practitioners. So you're kind of getting, you know, support, like a lot of support still. So I think that's a great option. And then there are places, like where I did my internship, one of the places I did was Southern California Counseling Center, and they're kind of like in the Fairfax Pico district.
There's one over here in North Hollywood at, I want to say, Chandler and Laurel Canyon.
Oh, that has a
counseling center.
counseling
that has,
center.
like,
So they have trainees.
Yeah.
And they really do a sliding scale. So, you know, if somebody, you know, isn't able to afford therapy with me, and they really want like a much lower, like too low for me to slide, I will send them a few referrals to counseling centers.
When you say licensed, what are we looking for when we're, like, what does that mean to be licensed? And what credentials would you expect for like
that's a great question.
therapist?
So, so to be licensed as a therapist, you get your master's in generally clinical psychology, and then there are 3,000 hours that you are doing, working with clients, also kind of some of the paperwork stuff, but a lot of like face-to-face client hours that is under supervision. So you're in the room, you are the person's therapist, but then once a week you check in with a supervisor and have a session, oftentimes a group session, so you're hearing about, you know, not specific details that identify anybody, but you're really getting schooled in a lot of different things that might come up and how, different people deal with them and also different people's styles. And so then after that, like for me, it took about 5 years from beginning to, starting school to getting my license.
And in order
And then-
to be a licensed family therapist, you have to have a master's.
Yeah. And so I have I'm a marriage and family therapist, which means, it doesn't mean that I'm always working with couples. I work with mostly individuals, I would say, some couples. But it's all relational. Our whole lives are. So, and then there's also licensed clinical social workers. So you'll see, like for me, it's LMFT. For a clinical social worker, it's LCSW. And they also see clients, individually or couples or families. And then there's LPCC, which is licensed something clinical counselor, but that's not as like in California, as far as I know. I don't know many LPCCs, so it's just MFTs and social workers mostly.
Can I ask one final question that we didn't really talk about before, but I think maybe other people might wonder about this too. What is the difference between a therapist and a life coach? And what might someone look
And
to?
a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Like, can you prescribe?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So, such a great
I just
question.
totally cut off I meant to ask this earlier. and
This
then
is a good question to end with then, because
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta, that gunk.
And that's, just an extension of the question too. It's like, so a psychiatrist is a doctor who you maybe meet with once and then you check in with them, who can not prescribe, thank you, not assign, prescribe medication.
But
And
they
then,
don't- but
so they don't
do
usually,
talk therapy anymore,
yes,
really.
they
Right,
don't.
okay.
For the most part, there might be some out there that do, but for the most part, they're seeing people to prescribe medication. There are psychologists who also have their doctorate, and they oftentimes see clients one-on-one, but what they're more specialized in, generally speaking, are assessments. And they, it's a little bit, I'm sure there are many psychologists who don't do assessments and they do just kind of regular therapy, but they're able to, and oftentimes that's what they're specializing in. And then there are life coaches
Which
who do
is this
not
a
need
recent
to.
thing that they're like that these are sort of dovetailed, that like therapists and or life coaches are sort of coming more into the fore as therapists.
Yeah.
Right. But this is
And I think it is
new, right?
confusing. I think it's new that it's like more. Yeah, there's more. It's more visible, more out there, and so coaching. I feel like oftentimes I'm kind of in the role of coach when I'm helping kind of support people to identify things that aren't working or things that are working, and helping to kind of, support someone to live the life they are wanting to live. A coach does not have the credentials that a therapist does. They don't necessarily. You could say, I'm a life coach, and start coaching.
I can say that.
You could say that.
I can say that.
Yeah.
Kay Hanley, life coach.
I would be so good at it.
There are also amazing life coaches out there. There are also programs that you go to and you get credentialed through a specific kind of life coaching program. It's different than like getting your master's, but it's, you know, so some people really do kind of go on that path. It's just that if things come up that are more kind of deep, or if there's trauma that's stirred up, that's, you know, some areas are just like coaches are not supposed to open those parts up.
You're being very gracious about this, because if there were like, I guess in songwriters always have dilettantes coming in and trying to do what we do. Actually, that's not really true, but like people coming in and thinking that they can
just hang up their shingle. Yeah, it's different. They're not regulated basically by like a board, which is, I mean, as a therapist, I'm regulated by a board, which I just want to check in with you and see how this is feeling for you, and how, you know, like after we've gone through different discussions and, you know, conversation.
Do I get like multiple choice for how I'm feeling? Like
you could get
how I'm
multiple
feeling?
choice, yeah.
Because I don't know if I would know. I mean, my inclination, and we know because we talked about being people pleasers.
Yeah.
Be like, you're great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd say I recognize the people pleaser when I see one.
This was great.
Because I am one too. Yeah,
so
right.
I don't know if I have the
like how you would,
vocabulary
and
for
you know, it also, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard for me to say, like, because we haven't had a real like session.
Right.
I think I would have a very different wrapping up, I would say, because I would be drawing from the stuff that came
the
up.
very private things. That
The
we
very
discussed,
confidential
not the
things.
Public things.
But I think in this case, you know, let's say we've been exploring what you're looking for in a therapist, different ideas that you might kind of carry with you in your search. And then also, one of the things I do almost every session with people just throughout is at the end of the session, I like to come up with, you know, together with an intention that is not, again, for the perfectionists, it's not homework that you have to do, but it's something to either, it could be something to be aware of, some small step to take, it could be a practice to try, and I frame it like it's a science experiment that if you do it, you'll kind of see how that impacts you and, you know, what effect it has. If you don't do it, then that's something, you know, it's like what was in the way of doing that. And it's just part of it. It's kind of like a way to extend the therapy beyond just that session.
And songwriters love a good prompt.
Yeah.
We all love a good prompt. And so leaving with something like that, that's helpful.
One question I have for you is, you know, since you feel like it hasn't been, like it's kind of, you're teetering on it being a priority.
Yeah.
What do you feel like would be something that would kind of support you in taking a small step toward finding somebody for yourself?
Well, I think this conversation is obviously helpful because it's taking an action towards a goal, and that always, you know, it's like the next indicated thought or action is like always the easiest route for me. So I mean, I guess it's what I don't want.
Yeah.
Is for an emergency. I don't want an emergency. I would love to go into this process without it being an emergency, you know? And so,
That's a lovely intention, and
That's my intention.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that you're not in an emergency right now.
Yes.
So
And I will ask you, now
Yeah.
that I know you and you know me,
yeah,
if you have three
Some
people
people.
that I can interview, that I can consult,
yeah, yeah,
and see if the person is out there that I feel like I vibe with.
yeah. That's great. So
That's
so
next.
getting 3 referrals from me. Next step.
That's the next step.
Boom. It just
Done.
happened. You witnessed it
And so,
here
and
live.
this is like building accountability in, because next time I see Sarah or Lucy, they're gonna be like, so, did you?
Yeah.
So I'll be accountable.
And I also think, the fact that you, like you said, you're doing this, just even that, like, you're putting it out there to the universe, and energetically you have shifted your maybe stuckness, you're moving. There's movement. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tracy Dickerson and Kay Hanley, and thank you all for being here. And that is the end of our Wellness Fest, our
Wellness Fest.
inaugural Wellness Fest, the SONA
Thanks for
Foundation.
being with us for our first Wellness Fest. You guys crushed it. Kelly,